I was taught early at the Center for Creative Leadership that the power of listening was to slow my mind down in such a way that when I'm receiving what someone else is saying, I actually might be changed. So to listen to another's perspective, not defensively or in a ready way to respond too quickly, but to listen in such a way that I actually might be changed. So consider their interests, slow down, be curious, ask really good questions, and make space for more of the airtime of the other.
Welcome to the 1110 Leadership Podcast, where we tackle issues at the intersection of leadership, faith, and culture. I'm your host, Rob Shields, Vice President of Strategy at 1110 Leadership, and I'm joined by my co-host, founder and CEO of 1110 Leadership, David Spickard. Proverbs 1110 lays out a bold and countercultural vision. When the righteous prosper, the city rejoices. We're here to ask, what does it look like practically to be this type of leader? Leaders willing to invest everything they have so that everyone around them can thrive. Join us on the journey as we lean in, listen, and learn how to become Proverbs 11:10 kind of leaders. The kind of leaders that make our cities rejoice. David.
Hello, Rob.
Hello, my friend. How are you doing?
I'm good.
Yeah?
Yep.
Are you ready to go global today?
We have our most distant guest.
Yes. I don't even know what the mileage is, but it's far.
It's a lot of time zones, the most time zones.
I don't know what the previous record was. I was trying to think geographically of our guests. I know we've had some folks from all across America join virtually, but never before have we crossed continents until today. No Canadian guests? No, nothing like that?
No. So Steadman Harrison, good friend of yours, and who's in Ethiopia and leads an organization called Lead Beyond that came out of the Center for Creative Leadership that actually is based near us in Greensboro, North Carolina, as a way to make leadership development more accessible across the world. So his perspective is incredible. And so I'd love for you to weigh in, given your history with Steadman and what our listeners can anticipate today.
Yeah, Steadman is someone that I go way back with. We connected for a brief moment in time when I had just graduated from college and was living in Addis Ababa through a program based here in Raleigh called Cherokee Gives Back, and living and volunteering in the capital city there. He came in. I didn't know much about him. He was only staying for a short stint, but he did some personality tests with the people living in my house and was doing his leadership coaching work.
What personality did you have?
I don't remember what the things were, but I think I aced the test. And I remember you being really impressed. That's all I remember.
Okay.
So honestly, now, David, you can imagine how full circle this feels, getting reconnected to his work, now doing the work we're doing at 1110, and just being able to reconnect to that part of my story and our shared story, and just be able to have a leadership conversation with him now is pretty cool. He has a lot of nuggets for our listeners that really reinforce some of the principles that we talk about all the time here at 1110, down to how do we define success? What does that look like to move from an individual focus to a communal focus? How do we build cultural competency? I don't know what we didn't check as far as boxes in this conversation, David, but really excited for our listeners to be able to hear from his global perspective on leadership.
Excited for you guys to hear Steadman. Here now is our conversation with him.
Steadman, welcome to the 1110 Leadership Podcast.
Great to be with you all, and great to dial in from Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
Congratulations on being our first international guest.
Yeah, definitely furthest away by far.
Yeah, I'm excited and glad that Rob, for 20 years of history that brought us to this moment. So you were here a long time ago. Thanks for dialing me back in.
It's wild. Yeah. We talk about the importance of leaders knowing kind of their origin stories and their whys. And it's crazy to think about how far back our paths crossed in, I think, 2007.
That's right.
When you came and visited when I was living in Addis Ababa, and you came and wearing your leadership hat. We had some really cool leadership conversations and some assessment conversations that I think planted some early seeds for the work that we do now at 1110. So it feels like a really full circle moment for sure to be talking to you in this way.
It's great.
Yeah, so for me, jumping into you guys and your history, I'd love, Steadman, to just get a bit of your story. I know in looking through your information, the Center for Creative Leadership was a place where you guys launched Lead Beyond, and what has you in Addis Ababa. And so I'd love to know why. What's the origin?
Yeah.
What prompted this? I know you had a small group of people who are thinking about leadership and how you spread it across the world. Just would love to get the nuggets from that story.
Sure. I loved my time at the Center for Creative Leadership. I was actually just there in Greensboro about 3 weeks ago for a memorial service of one of our friends, Bill Drath, a great author, great friend. The amount of people that poured into my life while I was in Greensboro at CCL was amazing. And they had this great tagline. The tagline for this nonprofit was for the benefit of society worldwide. And I'll just say we struggled with getting stuck in a niche at the top of the Fortune 50. The top 2% of the world was drawn to the deep expertise of the Center for Creative Leadership. And it was after a trip to Eastern Africa that I said, you know what? I'm going to go back and try to deliberately put a fingerprint on democratizing this work, making it affordable, accessible, and scalable. And that's how Leadership Beyond Boundaries was born at the Center for Creative Leadership. And eventually, Lead Beyond came out as its own organization, its own 501c3.
Wow. So accessibility for leadership development is really at the heart of this.
It's
And
hugely important. Yeah.
and give me a history of your time in Ethiopia and how you're seeing that as a place to really ground your work from there.
Sure. The first trips that we made in 2005 were to Uganda, Kenya, and to Ethiopia, and had some amazing opportunities. The idea of accessibility, by the way, was how do you take something that gets packed into a $10,000 program, is part of a leadership experience that someone really can't articulate? How do you make what was implicit explicit? How do you take the lessons of a leadership development program that costs $10,000 and bring it to someone at $1 a day? And so that's what happened. Found myself here working with a Unity University and executive programs for the Center for Creative Leadership as a launch pad to get this out to more people. And from there, again, we ended up launching the Center for Creative Leadership in Addis Ababa. That was still running until November of this last year. They ramped business down mainly because of the political landscape and changes in the NGO community. Funding, I think, was changing and they saw it coming. So, yeah, a little bit of a different speed right now, but a long 20-year history now.
It's really fascinating, even thinking back to our time together shared in Ethiopia, how much, when you think about what you've done to democratize leadership development and what that does to maybe uniquely position you to really be an observer about how you see leadership trends in a really unique way, right? When you talk about the most folks who are working with the Fortune 50 folks and they're coming in and they're maybe trying to help them see a wider lens of how the world works. And yet there's still that work is naturally siloed to the point that what you observed that you were looking to disrupt. So I wonder, as you have now done the work, working with leaders around the world, and have democratized that work where you're working with all kinds of leaders, not only across the level of affordability, but even just a place. Watching what you've observed there as they navigate leadership issues, as they navigate things like disruption and uncertainty, which are a through line of leadership everywhere, I would assume. I would love to just hear from you, from your perspective, what patterns you're seeing right now across sectors, across continents.
Yeah. So if I think back, we started training the idea of a VUCA world. This came out of the Army War College. A futurist named Bob Johansen popularized it. VUCA world, volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous. We were probably talking about that back in 2007 when I met you. But I will say what's happened is that the world has become more VUCA, more volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous. It's impacting in terms of change every demographic. So whether we're working with government, nonprofit, non-government, private sector, the world is really grappling with change at a faster pace. We deal with change, crisis, conflict, and culture as sort of our tenets. And I would say those are the things that are pulling people apart. And we need more people speaking into those systems to say, hey, how can we actually use leadership as a tool to pull us together? So that's a big part of what we're doing, bringing direction, alignment, and commitment to the masses and giving them the language to really describe their own circumstances and talk about it in new ways. Doesn't matter what background you're in, the backdrop is full of conflict these days, particularly the divisiveness of people in systems that just see it from a different angle, but are polarized rather than finding that central space where they can come together and have common ground.
So give us a sense, Stedman, how leaders that you're working with are responding to those conversations that you're having and the way you're guiding them. And is there a particular framework or way you think about helping them navigate those 4 C's?
I think in every case, we're applying what we think of as vertical development, and I can say more about that, but trying to help people grow up, to grow bigger minds, and by way of growing bigger minds, to actually see people different than themselves, to be curious, to slow down, and to have different conversations. A lot of times, our Lead Beyond team is being asked into a conflict scenario where really you need to show up with more heart than just head. As consultants, we've got a lot of things that we can apply from great books, great research. But how do you show up with those frameworks and also a heart for the good of the people that you're actually meeting with and trying to see that on behalf of one another? And so I think in all kinds of systems these days, we're asking the question, do you see others? Are you slowing down to be curious? Are you looking with new perspectives? And do you have the ability to see yourself through their shoes rather than from your own perspective? Listen in new ways.
And is that what you mean by vertical development?
It's a little bit of a complex piece to describe. We talk about essentials, and so we try to boil these things down into very easy to remember frames, rules of three. Vertical development is stage theory. So most of us are familiar with Piaget or Maslow, the whole idea that a child is growing up and goes through stages of development, that humans need all kinds of things that help them prosper in order to get to higher ideas or ideals. Vertical development really is literally maturing, becoming wiser, becoming more other minded through that process. And so we talk about fallback, center of gravity, and emergent behavior. Most of us have a center of gravity, a stage that we're in, and striving towards an emergent behavior is that growing up. And then we all experience this issue of fallback. So when I'm under stress, when I'm under pressure, I find myself going back to like childish ways, ways that are a little more opportunistic, a little more impulsive, and possibly even at the detriment of others.
Wow. So it doesn't mean just getting taller. Is that what? Because I was thinking I had that box checked, but it sounds like maybe there's more to it than that. Just growing vertically in a physical sense.
Yeah, it's interesting. I often mentioned to adult learning groups, hey, you're still growing up. And particularly overseas and cross cultural settings, that is the idea that people have. Oh, I'm physically growing up. But we never finish this growing up aspect of who we are. And in fact, if you think about the elders that you probably appreciate the most, respect the most, they're still on that learning journey. They're still growing up and they own that. They own the fact that they aren't finished yet, that the journey is still out in front of them and not behind them, even though they have a lot to pull from in terms of experience. So helping people see that they can grow a bigger mind, see things from new angles and new perspectives, and really hold the perspective of others is key to this. And turning on a news channel to just look at any example that we have in leadership these days, we see people get sucked into the spotlight, the self-focus, the it's all about me rather than about others. And so how do we grow out of that, catch ourselves in it and get beyond it?
Yeah, it's fascinating because when I think about that move from the individual and the self focus to other mindedness, it could include your team, your family, and or any other, the organization, or even just the place in which you are doing your work or society writ large. That's a journey that sounds like we're all needing to take universally, but there might be some different barriers culturally depending on where you're working. Could you just speak to maybe how you've seen that model be different depending on where
Sure.
you're doing the work? I mean, we're coming from the American West, right? A
Yeah.
highly individualistic place, society where we have our own thorns and obstacles that kind of help us get away from self to the love of neighbor. But would love to just hear you speak on how you've observed that be different in other
Yeah.
cultures in which you're doing leadership development.
We talk a lot about the me to we flip. Most of us are competent in our managerial roles. We're individual contributors to a certain extent. And we need to get beyond that when we start to work with a team. It's interesting to me, I think, as a parent, as a grandparent, when you see your children and you recognize that they are unique and different beings than you are. You want their best. You want them to grow up to do well. You start to pour yourself into them. You mentor them. You guide them. You try to pull from your experience to protect them. I think the best of the me to we flip is not being patronizing or parental, but leveraging that natural inclination to see others and to want their good and to do that in teams so that we think, hey, I'm going to speak on our behalf. I'm going to include you in the spotlight. I'm actually, rather than the senior team member taking the spotlight, I'm going to put that on the successes of the many rather than my own successes. And that's a deliberate step that we have to take. It wasn't easy for me. I remember in my early career, wanting to still have the spotlight and get all of the glory out of the good moments that we had, but sharing that with the team and then sharing feedback in powerful ways that help them learn, grow, and change. Oftentimes, I think we're tempted to hold on to the feedback that we can give to another person because it's difficult, it's challenging. But just like we would want to invest in our children, how do we actually show up and invest in our team members, in our organizations, and see people that are different than ourselves? That's the key piece of the me to we flip. We first see people most like us, but then if we cast our vision a little bit more broadly, we start to see people different than we are, coming from different backgrounds, cultures, experiences, and we start to include them in the narrative.
Stephen, what, as leaders begin to recognize that and understand how they need to see people in those ways, particularly the cultural differences, what skills do they need to be able to do that well and to build trust? And there's what I hear you saying is there's one step, which is you got to move away from me and me being the center and start to lead through people and build teams and have a sense of collective ownership. But then you're also identifying another level of complexity when you're navigating people who are different from themselves, from one another, and have some real cultural difference, and just the skill set that it's required for a leader to be able to connect people across difference in order to build a team that's united, taking into consideration all of everyone's gifts and backgrounds and what they bring to the table. So what would you say a leader needs to develop, or how they grow in those areas that can help them do that?
I often start with some very old wisdom. So it was Paul that was speaking to the church at Philippi, and he used these words: consider the interest of others greater than you consider your own interests. And then he unfolded the fact that we have access to the mind of Christ, someone who didn't consider equality with God a thing to be grasped, was willing to set that aside and take the form of a servant. Okay, so there's a lot there. Being curious about the interests of others. What are they interested in? Why are they here? Asking good questions, slowing down and listening in new ways. I was taught early at the Center for Creative Leadership that the power of listening was to slow my mind down in such a way that when I'm receiving what someone else is saying, I actually might be changed. So to listen to another's perspective, not defensively or in a ready way to respond too quickly, but to listen in such a way that I actually might be changed. So consider their interests, slow down, be curious, ask really good questions, and make space for more of the airtime of the other. And it's just not easy. I think the more senior we become, the more people look to us for advice, for guidance, taking the coaching mantle and asking good questions and letting people discover answers for themselves is an other-minded step. It's not an easy thing for us to recognize they're the players on the field. We can't live in their shoes, but we can imagine what that would be like and ask really powerful questions to help draw that out for them.
Yeah, I love how when David asked that question, I'm thinking about all the complexity of navigating, trying to build a culture across difference. But then your answers are honestly astonishingly simple and not simplistic, because it takes skill to be able to be curious and to do it well, and to listen well is an art form. but it's not an overly complex idea you're presenting. It's these basic principles, and yet are really hard sometimes for leaders to do. But the path is right there. Be curious, be a good listener, and come prepared. Do the work of preparing good questions for your people to show them that you really care and you're centering them in a conversation.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I'll just add, you asked David a little earlier, are there tools that we use? I mentioned these essentials. One essential that came out of the Center for Creative Leadership was the idea that we can look at the outputs of effective leadership. We can look for direction, really clear vision, alignment, people coming together, being on the same page, using resources and tools to the same end, and high levels of commitment to know whether or not good leadership is taking place. Rob, back to this piece of the conversation, I think one of the things that we need to offer as an input so that we get those outputs is helping people discover the vision. So asking really good clarifying questions. Do you know where you're going? How are you going to know if you get there? What's getting in the way of getting there? But the vision clarity, creating order, and then really helping people feel protected and safe. We create, as coaches and facilitators, psychologically safe environments. We know that for a classroom. Do we do that on a daily basis for the people that we're working with in and out of the office, the people in the marketplace that we experience? The creation of psychological safety is probably the thing that helps us in terms of that other-minded act more than anything else.
Steadman, you also talk about the danger of leadership isolation. Really would love for you to unpack that. We find many of the leaders that we're working with are in positions where they feel alone because they need those safe places themselves to go in order to feel like they can A, be themselves, B, sometimes talk about things that they can't talk about with other people. They feel the stress and the anxiety that's weighing on them, and they need to be covered, protected, surrounded, and instead of being isolated. How do you guys approach that through your work?
Yeah, in a very practical way, I think we're coaching people towards genuine transparency. I say genuine because I realize we're tempted in our modern age to present a Facebook version of ourselves. So, genuine transparency is really allowing people to look in on our lives and see the foibles, see the messiness, be a little bit more vulnerable. I talk personally about living in a glass house. So I love having people live with us, literally in our home. We've had about 80 people live with us here in Ethiopia over the years, and longer than a 6-week stay, 6 months, a year. And what that means is that the conflict that I have with my wife is
Wait. 80.
yeah, more than 80 people have lived with
Let's
us.
hold on. More than 80. And you said longer than 6 months.
Yeah, exactly. So
So
20,
I don't know.
20 years of doing
That's a whole
this.
nother thing.
But think about the glass house
Wow.
effect of having somebody, again, eat dinner with you, see conflict between you and your spouse, watch your parenting style, hear your voice as it increases and gets loud because you get excited or angry. Having someone live in your space means that you're being accountable to a much higher level. And I think one of the challenges that I see in leadership is that the higher we go, there's a temptation to start to showcase only the good side, the Facebook version, and to guard ourselves against someone looking literally over our shoulders and seeing the mess. And so I would just say leaders need to open themselves up to people who can genuinely see what's going on, to ask them the powerful questions back. So if you've been asking powerful questions out, who's asking the hard questions of you? As a coach, I typically have 2 coaches at any one time in my life pouring into my life so that I can be effective pouring into others. I think we can start to isolate ourselves out of a self-protective space because, again, life gives us that bubble. We get the opportunity to shut the door, to close the window, and to turn some things off that used to be a little more open.
Yeah, I think that's really profound, Stebbin. And I think back even to my time in Ethiopia for this next question, playing off the theme of being insular and all the dangers that come with that. One of the things that I've found pretty common in our work, working with leaders, and I would say this is true, faith or non-faith, is that attachment to place is really something that we can't assume when we come alongside of a leader. And our whole business is called 1110 leadership, based on the Proverbs 11:10, when the righteous prosper, the city rejoices. But we find it a real struggle for people to have a city rejoicing framework for their leadership because they don't really feel a strong connection to place, which is oftentimes just very much a byproduct of culture. And I think that usually their faith doesn't typically, in our experience, sometimes doesn't actually serve as an asset to help them feel a deeper connection to place or neighbor. And so I wonder, do you find that also in your work across cultures, in your work globally, when you work with leaders across countries? I can make some assumptions based on my time in Ethiopia that some cultures do that better than others. But would love to just hear you unpack how you've seen that verse play out when it comes to how you help to cast a vision for the flourishing of communities through the roles of leadership, and what does cities rejoicing look like for you in your work at Lead Beyond?
Sure. I think we could be quickly maybe critical of global north, Western mindsets, the individualism. I think we're tuned into the fact that we're wired to be individualistic. The question about what's in this for me is often somewhere in the back of our minds. The way in which we've been brought up, our work ethic, the kinds of metrics that we have for success. But working across 70 plus countries now, particularly here in the context of Africa, in the Middle East, I really do see that people work from a collective sense. There is a natural we rather than the me. People think about even the ways in which they think of success as a collective action, not an individual action. Poverty is one of these really tricky things. The negative side of poverty is that you've got a system sort of pulling you down. It's not about a financial metric, it's really about a culture that pulls a group of people down. At the same time, we see communities pulling each other up. And so for me to look for all of the collective, community oriented, natural ways that people show up in leadership and do that as a group, that's the place to go to look for good things that are happening globally. And I do see ways in which, again, communities, particularly in Ethiopia, particularly here in Eastern Africa, across the continent, think in a collective sense. That's, by the way, where that Ubuntu idea came from. I am because we are. It's not about me, it's really about my connection to other people. And so, looking for examples of that globally, you start to find all kinds of other ways of seeing success and feeling that sense of it's really about survival of the larger group, not the individual who gets ahead.
Yeah, I think for us in the US, the Western world, we have a lot to learn. Just our orientation is so independent, so self-centered on what we can do and how we can take care of ourselves, that the community orientation and the we dynamic is just such that is experienced more frequently across the world. Really needs to inform the way we live, the way we lead. I'm just fascinated to think about 70 different countries and what you've learned. Steadman, it's just been great to have you today. I wonder, do we have time for our rapid fire questions, Rob?
Yeah. Steadman, are you down? We usually do a bottom line, but for you, we want to throw like multiple rapid fire questions at you because I think some of these even just will be really interesting to hear your perspective from your unique vantage point. So, you ready for some rapid fire conclusion questions?
Let's do it.
All right, let's go. Question one: what's one leadership book that you come back to often?
Bill Drath, I mentioned him at the very beginning of this, wrote The Deep Blue Sea. And I keep coming back to it because it describes the system beneath the surface that casts that one wave, oftentimes the individual leader that we see, but it's the direction, alignment, commitment, the deep blue sea that makes that possible at any one moment in time. I love my friend Bill. I love his contributions to leadership development and would recommend the book wholeheartedly.
That's great. We'll make sure to include that link in the show notes. At first, when I heard the Deep Blue Sea, I know that's also a shark movie, but I don't think that's what you're talking about now. That's something very different.
No, and I happen to have a lot of shark stories. So I've got
Okay.
friends who often tease me about the deep blue sea and my fear of sharks. They go hand in hand.
Okay. I'm sorry to bring that up for you. Okay. What's one place in the world that has most shaped how you lead?
Probably in terms of place, Jerusalem. I love the fact that even the old city, if you think about it, Armenian, Jewish quarter, like there were always different factions, Islam strongly represented, that had to coexist and figure it out. And I really love the fact that when you go to Jerusalem, You see people trying to figure that out even now. I realize Israel's a tough place to go to right now, but I recommend Jerusalem as a wonderful city. I had the privilege of teaching at Hebrew University, doing work in that country deeply. And the innovation culture as well that comes from that is amazing. So, another great book, Innovation Nation, talks about the pressure cooker effect of Israel and the reason that so many innovations come out of it.
Mm. Steadman, what's one of the most underrated leadership traits?
Probably listening. I think we talk about it a lot, but I don't think we practice it well. I do think emotional intelligence, this self awareness, self control, social awareness, social skill is something we discuss a lot. But I do think listening to ourselves, really understanding ourselves, listening to others is a skill that we need to build more. And so, those people who are naturally inclined to being good listeners, I believe they're deeper leaders as a result.
I love that. What about a habit or rhythm that is keeping you centered right now in your leadership?
Unplugging from the city. So I realize I am in the city of Addis Ababa, capital city of 10 million people. It's tremendously busy. I'm a pastor teacher on Sundays. But when Sunday wraps up at church, we go south to a lake. And I love being close to bodies of water. I love doing that with my wife and with friends. But I really do think taking a different perspective and getting out of the context is a really healthy rhythm. So if you can do that and you can build that into your pattern of life, even in small ways, cafes, whatever those things are that are accessible, getting out of the rhythm and seeing it from a different lens, do that when you can.
Mm. Final question. We actually just had a recent conversation about a Gallup research that found that what the number one thing that followers need most from their leaders is hope. So I'm wondering, Stedman, in the spirit of that, what is giving you hope right now?
The next generation. I had the privilege of raising three sons, Miles, Liam, and Ethan. To see them walking as leaders, walking with the Lord, devotional in their life, connected to their church and their community, people of service. I've got one in the U.S. Navy who's an officer on the USS Helena, one at Mission Hospital in Asheville, and one right around the corner from you all at University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. But man, the next generation and the one beyond it. I've got two grandsons. I could go on all day about Caleb and Colby and the hopes that I have for them. But yeah, just to see that next generation stepping up and doing it well.
So good. And this has been fantastic. Thank you for your vision and pursuing that vision and realizing it, being faithful to things that are really important to make these concepts, like Rob said, that are very simple. They're hard to implement, but you're making them accessible in so many different places. And for us, it just shows how universal they are for all leaders in all contexts. These are the same things. We always need to hear it to center ourselves on what that looks like. So thank you.
Yeah. David, Rob, thank you for what your organization is doing and for the things that you prioritize. Even conversations like this, I would look forward to another one of these. Let's peel back the layers. I think there's a lot that we can learn together and ways that we can actually implement many of the things that we're learning together internationally as well as locally. I would love to see us work together in the future. So bless you both. Thank you for your heartbeat for leaders around the world.
Thank you so much, Devin. To learn more about 1110 Leadership, visit our website at 1110leadership.com. That's the numerals 11, then spelled out TEN leadership.com. That's 11 TEN leadership.com. There you'll find more resources to equip you on the journey of becoming an 1110 leader. You can also get connected to our growing leadership network. If you've enjoyed this episode, share it with a friend. To help others find us, you can also rate and review us on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to podcasts.